Before sunrise, the corridor breathes. Damp stone holds a thin skin of mist. Paper lanterns glow like small moons, silk-patched where moths ate crescents from the light. Far inside the palace, boots tap in pairs, heel, then toe, stretching the last hour before dawn. A clerk clears his throat, a brush lifts, ink pools. The empire holds its breath and waits for the day to decide what to keep. Come closer. Lay your hand on the cold rail and feel how it holds its chill, even as the lanterns warm the air. That is how power feels at the lip of an era, cool, heavy, unwilling to admit it is tired. If you crave the turning points where routine, not heroics, decides the future, subscribe to What If Wars and keep walking with me. Here is the paradox we will test against the stone. The dynasty doesn't survive by being stronger. It survives by being smaller in the right places. Not more banners, not louder drums. Smaller where it bloats, tighter where it leaks. Boring where it once performed. The rescue does not ride in with cavalry. It arrives as a schedule. Listen to the boots. They are not marching to a fanfare. They are marking time. Empires fall when their beat breaks. Empires endure when someone, somewhere, keeps the tempo. What if continuity is not an oath, but a clock? What if the soft click of an abacus is the sound that saves a throne? Imagine a court that stops promising immortality and starts promising to be on time. There is a number in the dark that will not let the corridor sleep. 450 million taels. 450 million. Count it slowly. Feel it settle like a river stone in a bowl. Indemnity turned metronome. Interest ticking. Installments due, a figure that can crush a state if it lies, or discipline a state if it listens. Weight can be anchor, weight can be ballast. Which it becomes is the first hinge of our story. Inside, lamps sway when a servant passes, and then steady. Patch silk, holding light the way habit holds a household together. This is how a dynasty survives its own noise. Let the noise run out, and the schedule remain. You have stood in an hour like this. A ledger refused to forgive. A bill arrived that did not care whether you were ready. A date circled in pencil taught you to show up early. Survival, of families and states, begins with ordinary promises kept on ordinary days. We will measure those promises in silver weighed and salaries met, in trains that arrive and ships that sail, in laws that walk from proclamation to practice and do not turn back. Along the way, you will meet people whose names print small and whose changes loom large. A Tianjin clerk counting silver under a foreign gaze, praying one miscount will not shutter a province's school. A quartermaster who learns to trust a pay calendar more than a patron. A merchant who hears, for a heartbeat, the tearing of his savings, and then the rustle of a bond swap that saves his house. A student sailing east not to escape, but to return with sharper tools. A dockyard foreman who counts sea days after an overhaul and finally sees the tally favor the waves. None of this is romantic. That is the point. Margins over miracles, maintenance over spectacle, subtraction over swagger, heel, then toe. The beat is old, but it holds. The corridor narrows into the doorway of our first dossier, where money teaches time to behave and time teaches power to sit up straight. The door swings open on a table of ledgers, string-tied, corners rubbed thin by nervous fingers. After 1895, the sums turn against the throne. Shimonoseki is signed, and the ink hardens into numbers that tap the skull at night. Indemnities are due, ports open wider. Revenues, already scattered by exemptions and middlemen, are pledged again, this time to clocks outside the palace. Defeat teaches a language with no poetry, due dates. Coastal custom houses stand like metronomes in mist. Flags crack, bells ring, hawsers sing. The collector's pen scratches as bales and barrels pass the window. That sound travels inland along telegraph lines, following salt caravans through county yamens, where land tax is counted by the handful, and paid in coin whose weight changes with province and season. The Imperial Maritime Customs Service, foreign-run, pruned to efficiency, tallies the lifeblood of the dynasty with a coolness the court pretends not to envy. Every ship clearing the bar is a syllable in a sentence written far from Beijing. Then, 1901. The Boxer Protocol hammers the number everyone can say without looking. 450 million taels over 39 years. Interest clicking like a bead on a wire. Customs revenues pledged as collateral. The empire's pulse strapped to an external machine. Here, our path refuses pride and chooses measurement. No savior general. A calendar walks in and asks for a desk. Announce a proto-central bank. No marble, no myth, only rooms and rules. Call it a reserve office. Let it issue a uniform silver note against a single declared standard. End the market of weights where a tael here is not a tael there. Nail the measure first. Nothing else holds without it. Under the reserve office, build a clean hierarchy of remittance. Customs to indemnity first, then civil pay. Salt to schools and courts. Land tax to provinces by posted schedule with penalties that hurt the guilty, not the teachers. The language changes from a favor to cycle. The empire learns to hear the hour. Do not rip out foreign-run customs. Keep it as the technical spine while nerves regrow. Stop apologizing for relying on it. Start domesticating it on purpose. Pair each foreign commissioner with a Chinese deputy whose reports are published in 2 languages. Create a 5-year ladder of localization. Rungs posted for all to see. Tie promotions to audits, not friendships. Make the ledgers bilingual before the titles are. People will grumble. They can grumble on time. Turn the telegraph into a conscience. Each week, totals move from coast to capital, from shed to county, from county to school treasurers. Break the week into ritual. On the same afternoon, at the same hour, across the empire, remittance lists are read aloud and sealed. The habit makes a promise. If customs falls short, festivals are cut before salaries. If silver rises against copper, the reserve office eats the spread, not the classrooms. Pain, when unavoidable, is assigned by rule. That is what legitimacy tastes like when dignity is too expensive. Tianjin, winter 1901. A clerk sits beneath a high window, fingers gray with dust from Saisi ingots stacked like dull loaves. A foreign inspector stands at his shoulder, watch chain winking. The clerk's brush trembles once, then steadies. He counts the weight, notes the assay, slides a bead along the cord. He thinks of the school his wife passes each morning, roof patched with tar paper and hope. He thinks of the letter that will say there will be no chalk in spring if he miscounts. He exhales, writes the character for silver, like a spine straightening. The bead clicks into place. Somewhere inland, a teacher keeps her post, because a number does not lie today. Coinage is tamed, tax is sorted. The order of payments is nailed to the gate where everyone can read it. Bribes grow clumsy under light. Salt moves not by nods, but because 2 signatures match a printed code and the week's allotment has space. Dignity returns as routine. Boredom pays on time. None of it is free. The palace trims processions. Fireworks are fewer. A quartet of rare vases is quietly sold to keep exam stipends alive. The reserve office refuses to advance funds for feasts while teacher pay is in arrears. Friends cool. Reception halls grow crisp enough to sting the throat. Yet discontent that cannot find exceptions begins to exhaust itself. The ledger is a wall the clever cannot burrow through. There are jumps no schedule can prevent. Silver prices lurch. River traffic slows and customs dip with the monsoon. In those weeks, habit matters most. The posted order of pain is followed as written. The court takes its slice last and publicly. Habit becomes reputation. Reputation becomes credit. Credit lowers interest. Interest loosens the knife. Day by day, the metronome ceases to be humiliation and becomes an internal pulse. Memorials change tone. Boast softens into report. I have secured the favor of fades. As per the timetable, spreads. The empire becomes legible to itself. Provinces learn, perhaps for the first time, exactly how much they owe and when. Men who traded favors begin to trade predictability. Barges leave on Tuesdays because Tuesdays mean something. Listen for the second hinge. Across the ocean, a portion of that indemnity is remitted on one condition. Convert silver into scholarships. Obligation into semesters. Let stubborn minds sail out on money that once chained the state and return with tools that make the chain unnecessary. The sums stop merely hurting and start building. Numbers that do not blink. The first dossier closes. The boots resume their patient tempo. The next room waits with pay ledgers and a regiment that must learn to obey calendars more than faces. Frost smokes from the mouths of men in identical coats. Rifles rise. At parade distance, the new army looks modern. Up close, the rhythm skews. Loyalty pools around one name, not the state. Pay, promotion, provisioning, one narrow stare, the same hands, the same pockets of gratitude and fear. Favor outruns policy. Muster rolls are tidy in ink, yet swollen in reality. A general's signature shortens winter. His frown lengthens it. Soldiers serve the man who answers tonight, not the stamp on the cap. Begin with the purse. Create a treasury committee for the army, dull as a bucket, stubborn as a drum, and bolt it to the reserve office. Salaries, rations, ammunition, transport contracts leave a locked account whose keys answer to rules, not a face. Receipts go forward. Audits come back. Variances trigger questions read aloud where anyone can hear them. Eloquence fades. Arithmetic remains. Move the map. Rotation by calendar, not rumor. Colonels shift posts before routes thicken. Quartermasters trade depots like lighthouse keepers trade coasts. Inventory, handshake, seal. No soft exceptions. Bands play the same march in a new town every 3 years. Factions find the ground sliding under them. A favorite cannot turn a regiment into a family if the family scatters on schedule. Standardize what ambition personalized. Print drills with the same counts everywhere. Clean rifles to the same tempo. Promotion exams blind to handwriting. Instruction travels with the manual, not the mood. Procurement carries stamps that match a public code. Crates without the right stamp wait in the rain. Excellence begins to mean the same thing in every province. The army's face stops being a general's expression and starts being the state's. Backlash pricks. Farewell banquets turn pointed. Suppliers who prospered in whispers curse open tenders. Headquarters hears the old way knock. The clerk points at the calendar. The door closes. Men who liked being indispensable learn to be necessary. Predictability, first resented, becomes rest. Training erases accents. Recruits from river flats and mountain gullies step the same beat under different lieutenants in different towns and find the beat unchanged. A sergeant who once slipped the best boots to friends now signs sizes by count and watches those boots carry strangers to posts he will never see. Pride shifts from my boys to our readiness. Winter, 1908. A quartermaster writes by candle in a room that smells of boiled cloth and oil. He tells his brother that he used to sweat at the sound of the general's cough, how a mood meant the wrong crates on the wrong day with the wrong signatures, and his name would be on the line when the soup ran thin. Last month the pay arrived without anyone bowing to anyone. It arrived because the calendar turned. He slept. A man who sleeps, he writes, does not steal. He adds a small story. A kid with shoes too big, courage too small, hiding at the end of the line. 3 posts, 2 rivers, 1 manual later, the kid passed a blind exam with a number, not a name. The machine runs better, the letter ends. When the oil is time, border scare. A charismatic officer preaches destiny in tents that feel too small. Rotation arrives like weather. His speeches must be packed. Funds post for the incoming unit. The handover happens with scales and checklists in the sun. No cheers, only a long exhale as the institution refuses to become a biography. Results arrive quietly. Pay met. Rations on time. Ammunition accounted. Transport paid by invoice. Boxes checked by civil clerks with ink on their fingers. The kind that never dries into myth. The army looks less like a pyramid on one pair of shoulders and more like a table with 4 thick legs. The rifles remain heavy, but the thing that keeps them pointed is not steel. Micro-reveal. The true weapon isn't rifles. It's the pay calendar. The boots cross the yard, heel, then toe. Frost fractures under them in every province. Beyond the door, law must learn to keep time with money and men. A hall of scrolls, a lectern worn smooth. Outside, hooves thud and fade. Inside, time is measured by the scrape of chairs and the rise of voices. Reform wandered for decades, but 1908 stamps a date on the wall, the outline of the imperial constitution. 2 years earlier, the examinations were abolished. The gate that sorted talent for 1,000 years is shuttered. Ambition scatters into schools, arsenals, editor offices, rail boards. And in 1909, provincial assemblies gather to practice a new muscle, speaking where someone must answer. The danger is not that nothing happens. It is that everything happens without a clock. Titles bloom, committees multiply, decrees admire themselves. If reform drifts, the outline becomes a hallway with no doors. Our path chooses doors and dates that arrive whether anyone slept or not. 9 years. Years 1 to 3. Responsibility tested where cash and steel live, finance and rail. Ministers answer questions in public, submit budgets, accept dismissal by written vote for lying or stalling. Years 4 to 6. Provincial assemblies gain rights to examine budgets, summon officials within a limited docket, publish reconciliations that sting. Years 7 to 9. A national cabinet survives confidence tests from an elected chamber. A narrow judiciary hears disputes on contracts and office. No philosophical wars, only habits of obeying written things. Pin dates to ritual. On the same day each year, in the same hall, at the same hour, milestones are read aloud and posted. If the palace trims, the calendar does not. If a minister promises fog, the clock refuses fog. The Constitution isn't parchment, it's deadlines. Against this metronome, the 19 Articles of 1911 cease to be a panicked concession and become the third checkpoint arriving like a train whose whistle is no longer a surprise. Power shifts from throne to cabinet in narrow lanes. Money first, movement next, speech last. The throne keeps dignity by keeping time. Resistance surfaces, honorable fear that speed will break bones. Selfish fear that order will break comforts. The timetable answers by measuring. Miss a checkpoint and ministries lose the right to hire without audit. Provinces lose the right to spend without countersignature. The throne loses the right to sign certain decrees without 2 public readings. The price of being late is the loss of discretion. Autumn 1909. A provincial assembly faces a slow river. Benches creak after the midday break. A young merchant with ink on his knuckles rises. He says an audit is not an insult. It is a lifeline. He trusts his governor the way a ship trusts a captain when the charts are on the table. If the school he funds must choose between a roof and enough chalk for winter, he wants to read the numbers that made the choice. The official across from him bristles, then glances at the posted schedule. Interpolation writes, limited but real. The questions land with the precision of a man who has watched cargo weighed until the scale told the truth. He sits. The room exhales. The next day's headlines are small. That is the news that matters. By 1911, habit has seeped into wood. When the 19 Articles are proclaimed, there is relief without frenzy. Provinces know what they receive and when. Ministers know what they owe and to whom. The palace knows what it keeps. Ceremony, continuity, custody of time, and what it yields, decisions that draw blood when hoarded. The Constitution becomes the hour a door opens, and someone must answer. Steel and timber wait beyond, ledgers of routes and weights, a spark once thrown by nationalization and fear. Here design cools iron, maps pinned with brass tacks and twine, coal where ridges lean back, wheat where rivers slow. Rails are arteries, invoices, payrolls, the difference between a market that sleeps and a market that arrives before noon. In 1911, the Hukuang Railway Loan is assembled, an iron crown of credit held up by foreign banks. Canton, Hankou, and Sichuan lines folded in. Terms bite, revenues pledged, oversight heavy, compensation a fog. In Sichuan, men who pooled lifetimes to buy shares wake to find their property nationalized and offered back as rumor. Pride flares into meetings, meetings into marches. The railway protection movement runs along the rails like fire. Sparks jump from Sichuan to Wuchang, replace confiscation with contract, weld ownership instead of erasing it. The state takes a golden share in each trunk route, veto on sale, control over safety and standards, but not a blank check on cash flows. Provincial shareholders swap their equity for domestic bonds secured on the route's future receipts. Coupons are sober. Bonds carry conversion rights back into equity once traffic crosses posted thresholds. The promise to locales becomes precise. Your capital will not be eaten by someone else's pen. Your patience will be paid, in time, in interest, and if the line performs, in ownership again. Foreign lenders keep a seat but face new incentives. Tie their interest to what they claim to trust. Trains that run, goods that move. Step-down rates activate when ton kilometers exceed printed marks, each mark audited. When freight flows, interest slides. If traffic falls, rates hold. If it rises, capital loosens. Incentives stop arguing and point in the same direction. Guarantees are small and visible. Write a revenue floor into each trunk contract, low enough to be honest, high enough to matter, backed by a narrow earmarked fund that cannot be rated. If receipts fall short, the fund tops them up. If receipts beat the floor, the surplus is split by a rule that favors maintenance first, debt second, dividends last. A line that cannot feed itself pays its mechanics, not its shareholders. Transparency becomes quarterlies read aloud where the line runs and posted in stations where passengers cannot miss them. Freight carried, passengers sold, coal shoveled, wheel sets replaced, minutes late, money in, money out. Waybills traced to pages, pages traced to coupons under kitchen bowls and foreign drawers. The plot is numbers, not names. Gauge is unified, curves are eased. Procurement follows Army code. Matching stamps, contracts clearing in light. A route trustee, unromantic, underpaid, incorruptible because the job is teeth and sleep, sits between line and owners and says no to good times that starve the maintenance shed. The trustee's report is read the same day the Constitution's milestones are read. Time that matters is heard together. Floods take bridges, war scares take harvests. A foreign crisis yanks capital like a tablecloth. The contract keeps a circuit breaker. Receipts fall through the floor. Dividends die. Debt breathes slower. Coupons extend. Spending locks to safety and payroll until the water recedes. Disappointment becomes predictable. Predictable disappointment is survivable. Chengdu, late 1911. A tea merchant's ledger is brown at the edges from years of thumbprints. His shares are gone by decree. Anger learns its shapes. Courtyards, slogans, meetings where fury eats sentences whole. Then papers arrive that are not rumors. Bonds, domestic, coupons printed in ink that will stain a finger, backed by the very line he believed in. Convertible if trains perform. Tradable in markets where men he knows argue over beans and coal. He reads them twice, slower. He imagines a winter roof paid by interest on time. He signs. He slides the bond into a blue envelope and notices the clock above the station door has been repaired. Grievance still marches, but fuel changes. They stole your future must recruit against, they offered you a contract. Bond registers replace petition sheets on tables. Pride grows quieter, heavier. It sounds like paper smoothed by a palm. The daily miracle is not speed, but reliability. Merchants adjust calendars. Farmers adjust plantings. Engineers adjust sleep. The ministry that tried to own every bolt learns to sequence instead. Set standards, enforce safety, read ledgers, and leave profit to those who can make it without starving the track. Power grows smaller and becomes strong. Micro reveal, the revolution's match was financing design, not slogans. Steel again, but this time steel that stays sharp because oil arrives when it should. Arsenals exist, workshops hum, but the rhythm is crooked. Parts are cousins, not twins. Gauges disagree. Coal arrives wet. Iron late. Blueprints in 3 alphabets match none of the tools. A ship goes to sea grand and returns humbled by a missing washer. States break not for lack of factories, but for lack of standards. Fix it with a map and a promise that sounds like a threat. Maintenance first. Draw 3 circles. North, where iron and coal sleep close. Center, where river and rail cross. South, where docks bite deep. Inside each, fold iron, coal, rail port into clusters that serve one master KPI. Fleet maintenance readiness, the percentage of days a unit can fight at full power without begging a foreign catalog. Post the number, live by it. Promotion, procurement, pride, the dial decides. Prestige purchases pause. Admirals want postcards, ministers want ribbons. Ban both until docks can feed what already floats. Build dry docks before battle cruisers. Buy floating cranes before brass bands. Machine shops that cut 100 identical threads become more beautiful than salutes. Standards turn language into torque. Every bolt, valve, gasket, bearing receives a number tall enough for a tired man to read in poor light. The catalog is scripture, revised like a tide table by date, not whim. Wrenches fit what you actually use. Coal is graded and signed for, so a stoker knows the heat promised before opening the bunker. Inspection, overhaul, lubrication calendars are posted where sweat can blur them, but not erase them. Money follows the calendar. First funds each quarter go to spares and wages, then to rail slots for moving heavy things, then to steel orders that match the maintenance plan. Anything left buys pride carefully. Tools before trim, cranes before paint. Each purchase faces one question. How many days at sea will this add? The U.S. remission of indemnity becomes semesters. Scholars are chosen in open exams. They sign bonded service, 5 years in arsenals, rail bureaus, docks, or power plants upon return. Families co-sign. The bond is not a chain. It is a promise that learning will come home and do the night shift. Spring, 1911. A student stands on a crowded quay with a ticket folded inside a letter that smells of camphor. He whispers not about glory, but about boilers. Abroad he learns tolerances, interchangeability, torque. He returns to a bench, not a parade. The catalog on the wall matches the addition in his trunk. A seal refuses to sit until cleaned and seated to spec. He smiles and keeps filing. Clerks become dangerous. Requisitions travel by part number and deadline. A car loaded with bearings is rescue. Rail schedules bend to service the dock. A vessel on blocks is a patient whose blood is time. Telegraph codes carry alerts. Destroyer down 2 days, cruiser up 3, yard on schedule, and deserving coal. Praise becomes hours, not adjectives. Loyalties shift. A captain writes his first long letter to the machine shop, not a nephew. He argues for a lathe and wins with math. Sailors joke that the true admiral is the catalog. Contracts with foreign suppliers narrow and smarten. We buy what we cannot yet make, and no more. We demand drawings that match our catalog. We write penalties for threads that cheat the gauge. Push back flares. Timid, say the thunder lovers. The dockmaster taps the wall. Days at sea are louder than brass. The minister who loves a ribbon learns to love readiness, which survives rain. Micro reveal: power isn't what you buy, it's what you maintain. By 1920, the clusters breathe on their own. Catalog editions turn like seasons. Scholarships return as hands, not headlines. Readiness dips and rises, and slowly rises more than it dips. When storms punch the coast, the docks look bored. A valve fails. A bonded boy replaces it before the sentence finishes. The empire, which once collected marvels, now collects intervals. The time between breakdowns and overhauls, the time between doubt and repair. Now, walk the calendar. 1912 opens like a ledger. Cabinet responsibility, tested in finance and rail, extends outward with care. Interior learns to file on time. Rail argues by numbers, not threat. Rotation completes in barracks. The Beiyang beat becomes the states. Portraits are boxed with uniforms. The band plays the same march in a different town, and no one complains because pay arrives with the calendar. 1913. Provincial boards read rail balance sheets in public halls without shouting. A station clock repaired in Chengdu draws fewer eyes than the quarterly ledger beneath it. Rumor weakens against posted columns showing receipts above the floor. Men argue in a new grammar. Not betrayal, but basis points. 1914. Internal affairs, permits, policing, epidemics, roads sit under a breathing schedule. A junior minister survives by shortening speeches. The Army's final rotation cycle finishes without a poem. The true headline is that there is no headline. 1915. War breaks elsewhere. Credit wobbles. The first domestic rollover of railway debt meets its hour. The trustees report lands, receipts sustained, maintenance funded first, coupons paid, new bonds taken at a sober rate. Panic fails to appear. Design proves the opposite of adrenaline. 1916, 1918. Customs localizations, Phase Y. Paired signatures, foreign loops, and Chinese squares under a clock that doesn't care about accents. Friction drops like a fever. Inland salaries arrive a week earlier. A teacher tears the second ledger she used to keep for truth and uses the clean side for essays. 1919. Banners of paper treaties. Begin clause-by-clause renegotiation on technicalities. Tariff autonomy enters as a pilot, not a flag. Rates adjust by inches. A bored lawyer becomes a figure for the way he reads commas. The hero, he says, is the timetable. 1920, 1921, clusters breathe, silver twitches, a flood tries a bridge, circuit breakers trip, dividends die, wages lev, exceptions starve. 1922. A dockyard foreman counts days at sea after overhauls and writes a total that makes his wrists prickle, more days at sea than in the port. Somewhere above him, a prestige purchase is delayed in favor of a floating crane. Capacity beats spectacle. 1923, 1926. Arbitration replaces spirals. Two governors who dislike each other are required to like the same calendar. A general with a following finds rotation moved his staff before ambition could bloom. Banners appear with numbers the clerk can disprove on a chalkboard. Crowds become meetings. Survival is dull and humane. 1927. Readiness reports read like poems to those who love metrics. Training follows parts lists. Editors print the board, a photograph of chalk lines, and shopkeepers pin it to walls. 1928, 1930. Tariff autonomy consolidates. The timetable closes without stopping. Elections feel like inventory. Cabinets change faces without changing ledgers. The palace keeps ceremony, continuity, custody of time. Storms come. A bank fails and is buried in its paperwork without dragging the street. A skirmish is swallowed by rotation. Drought is met by earmarked funds that open and close by rule. Grain moves along rails that privilege tonnage over speeches. Critics mutter that boredom made the country small. People who now live by clocks answer together. Small in the right places. Stand in a station where paint flakes and the clock works. Watch a ledger curl beside the ticket window. Count the seconds between a whistle and a wheel's first turn. That interval is the measure of what was built. Not a myth, but a margin. Not a roar, but a beat. Now stress the machine. Silver lunges. Coins disappear into drawers. Teachers count days to pay with old dread. Lamps burn late in the reserve office. Windows open for swaps at provincial treasuries. The uniform note is honored at a posted rate. Remittances keep their order. Indemnity, salaries, pageantry last. Cashiers read the rule and stamped the day's receipts without blinking. Festivals are trimmed by noon. School ledgers are not. Traders test for wobble. The wobble doesn't come. Each week totals are read aloud at the same hour. Dull steadiness starves panic. Months later, silver settles at a level no one predicted. Procedure defeated prediction. A border spark on a ridge so high the wind steals verbs. A colonel speaks in sentences with drums inside them and names hills after himself. He asks for discretionary funds. He receives a calendar. The Treasury points to pay ledgers and transport orders posted last week. Money already on rails his signature cannot bend. Rations move to units that exist on paper and in camp, not to entourages that exist in story. Rotation arrives at dawn. Postings exchanged, command passed, inventory checked under sky. The colonel salutes because the list is longer than his temper. A hung parliament. Ballots pour through a sieve and settle into no bowl. Parties must learn arithmetic. The caretaker rulebook takes the lectern. 1/12 budgets each month at last year's levels. No new ships, no new hires, no new promises without a vote. Salaries, maintenance, indemnities proceed by clock, not coalition. Committees report in voices dry enough to light a stove. Rail reads the quarter, Navy files readiness, interior posts epidemic allocations. All land like trains on platforms. Weeks stretch. A thin coalition forms not because a speech wins a war, but because the caretaker clock made politics feel redundant. The cabinet inherits books that balance themselves and an electorate that checks the hour. In the quiet after almost, the systems breathe. Emergency windows shut, forms are filed, figures match handbills. The rotation board is wiped and chalked again. Caretaker clauses return to their drawer with edges shinier from use. People who lived through months of almost learn a private prayer made of 3 nouns: clock, ledger, rail. Begin the lessons where the lives were. The Tianjin clerk counted silver until a school stayed open. The bead sliding under his thumb appears elsewhere, at the reserve office stamping receipts, at provincial treasuries reading totals on time, at customs initialing bilingual pages. None of it felt like miracles. It felt like chores done on time. Out of such chores, a dynasty kept its breath. The quartermaster who wrote that "a man who sleeps does not steal" was given a purse that belonged to rules, not moods. Governed by clocks, not faces. Small until the night is long and the soup is late. Then it becomes the difference between obedience and a story about destiny. The young merchant in the assembly insisted that an audit is a lifeline. Timetables create legitimacy. Not promises to be fair someday, but posted times at which someone must answer for chalk that did or did not arrive. The dynastic voice lost its thunder and gained a wristwatch. The tea merchant nearly joined a banner he could not fold back up. A contract found him first. Finance design is domestic peace. Numbers agreed upon are less cruel than rumors. Interests that ran on opposite tracks can be made to converge if their payoff rides the same train. The student whispered that he would return to make boilers hum. He did, bound by ink and family signatures. Scholarships are statecraft. Silver that shamed became semesters, then hands that flipped valves and darkness by feel. The dockyard foreman wiped chalk and discovered his favorite sentence was an equation. More days at sea than in port. Maintenance is grand strategy. It will never fit on a banner. It will make tomorrow. Clocks, ledgers, rails. They sit on tables and refuse to be impressed. They cannot be flattered. That is why they can be trusted. The dynasty's genius was not invention. It was a willingness to be bored the same way every day until boredom became strength. A government that publishes pain before parades can be believed when it claims solvency. An army that salutes a calendar can say no to a man who wants to be adored. A railroad that prints its lateness buys forgiveness cheaper than a speech buys love. A constitution that arrives like a bus schedule teaches citizens to expect, not to beg. Think of the map, tacks and twine and pencil scars, and the wristwatch above it. The watch divided yesterday from today, and made today predictable enough to build upon. There were storms, the silver lunge, the border spark, the hung chamber. We survived not by better profits, but by enforcing dull procedures at the hour they promised to show up. Predictability became a kind of courage. Keeping the beat became patriotic. When the foreman chalked his board, when the clerk tied his receipts, when the quartermaster folded his letter, when the assemblyman sat and the gallery exhaled, when the merchant slid the bond into the blue envelope, when the student whispered to iron and steam, each closed a loop opened by fear. They did it without fanfare. They did it with tools. Their quiet made room for tomorrow. Before sunrise again, the corridor breathes. Damp stone holds its chill. Paper lanterns tremble, then steady. Somewhere a broom whispers across tiles. The palace sounds smaller, as if the echo learned to keep accounts. A clerk ties a stack of receipts with string and smooths the knot with his thumb. Far away, a dockyard foreman erases a board and writes a new total without ceremony. In between, trains cross valleys on time. Letters meet stamps, pay fines names. The great noise that once tried to be power has thinned to a beat you can keep with your fingers on the rail. Walk the hall, you know. Pillars rub bright at shoulder height. A draft that smells of ink and salt. The boots return, steady as a watch. The dynasty, which once performed largeness, wears a quieter strength now. The strength of things that repeat and do not apologize. Fewer lost days. Cleaner books. Doors that open when their hour arrives. Hold the lantern to the faces we met. The clerk who kept a school open. The quartermaster who slept because his calendar did not flinch. The assemblyman who called an audit a lifeline. The merchant who kept his roof with a bond in a blue envelope. The student who came back with bolt numbers in his head and made boilers sing. The foreman who smiled at a board where sea days finally outnumbered port days. None of them conquered a map. They learned to make time keep its promises. Listen once more to the paradox, spoken softly so you can hear its bones. The dynasty doesn't survive by being stronger. It survives by being smaller in the right places. Smaller where vanity swelled. Smaller where fear demanded exceptions. Smaller where the drum wanted to drown the metronome. It kept ceremony and gave away improvisation. It let clocks do what oaths could not. It turned shame into semesters, slogans into contracts, thunder into maintenance. And because it chose boredom when boredom was the only honest bridge, tomorrow arrived. Now the lamps lower. The corridor narrows toward a door inked with clauses instead of banners. Tariff lines, transit dues, jurisdictions that taught men to look over their own shoulders in their own streets. The treaties that cut dignity into strips did not vanish when the calendar steadied. They learned to hide inside punctuation. Beyond this door lies part 2. Unequal treaties reopened clause by clause. Not with shouting, but with commas moved, rates reset, jurisdictions folded back into places where clocks can reach them, rooms with windows open, pages turned, small victories written into schedules. For now, the lantern's steady. The brush lifts and rests. Outside, the sky is the same quiet gray it was when we began, only nearer to blue. The boots pass, heel, then toe. The beat holds. The door closes softly.